Asterisk, a dedicated nurse collapses from exhaustion after a 36-hour shift. The next morning, a paralyzed CEO makes a shocking decision that changes everything. What happened next will restore your faith in humanity. Asterisk, before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us of the power of perseverance. Help us share more by supporting our channel. The breaking point. The fluorescent lights of St. Michael's Hospital hummed relentlessly, casting a sterile glow over the empty corridors. At 2:47 a.m., the ICU was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the occasional muffled voice over the intercom. Nurse Lena Carter leaned against the nurse's station, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter as she fought back another wave of exhaustion. 36 hours. 36 hours without real sleep, without a proper meal, without a moment to sit down and breathe. She had started her shift yesterday morning, expecting a normal day, but then her co-worker, Jess, had called in sick with the flu, and the ER had flooded with victims from a multi-car pileup on the interstate. One emergency after another, and before she knew it, she was the only nurse left standing in her wing. Her feet ached, her back screamed, and her eyelids felt like sandpaper every time she blinked. But she couldn't stop, not when patients needed her. She glanced at the clock again. Just a few more hours, just until the day's shift arrived. Then, the call light above room 412 blinked on. Lena exhaled, pushing herself upright. Room 412. Daniel Mercer. Of all the patients she had tonight, he was the most demanding, a tech billionaire. Paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident 2 years ago, he had been in and out of the hospital for complications from his injuries. The media called him a genius, a visionary. But here, in this hospital, he was just another patient. A difficult one. She smoothed her wrinkled scrubs and stepped inside. Daniel lay in bed, his sharp blue eyes tracking her the second she entered. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his jaw set in its usual hard line. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and expensive cologne. "You're late," he said, his voice cool. Lena forced a tired smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer. It's been a long night." He didn't respond, just watched as she checked his floor, adjusting the drip rate with practiced fingers. His silence was worse than his complaints. It made her skin prickle with self-doubt. "Everything looks good," she said, though her voice sounded distant, even her own ears. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "You look like hell." A surprised laugh almost escaped her. "Yeah, well, it's been a shift." He didn't smile. "You should sit down." "I can't. You're going to collapse if you don't." Lena ignored the way her vision swam at the edges. "I'm fine." She turned to leave, but the room tilted. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, sudden and violent. Her knees buckled. The floor rushed up to meet her. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Daniel's face, his eyes widening in shock, his hand reaching out as if he could catch her from where he lay. Then nothing. The unexpected witness. Consciousness returned to Lena in slow, disorienting waves. The first thing she noticed was a cold hardness beneath her. Not a bed, not a chair, but the unyielding linoleum floor of room 412. Her cheek pressed against it, the sterile scent of hospital-grade cleaner filling her nose. She blinked, her vision swimming as she tried to push herself up. Her arms trembled with the effort. How long had she been out? Minutes? Hours? The clock on the wall told her it was now 6:12 a.m. She had lost over 3 hours. A sharp inhale. She wasn't alone. Daniel Mercer was still in his bed, exactly where he had been when she collapsed. But unlike before, his expression wasn't cold or impatient. His brow was furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He was watching her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low, measured. Lena winced as she sat up fully, her head throbbing. I'm so sorry, Mr. Mercer. That shouldn't have happened." He didn't respond right away. His gaze flicked to the door, then back to her. "You've been here all night," he said finally. "They didn't relieve you?" Lena swallowed, her throat dry. She could lie. She could make an excuse. But the weight of the last 36 hours pressed down on her, and the truth spilled out. There was no one to relieve me. We're short-staffed. I didn't want to leave you unattended. Daniel's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stared at her, as if trying to decipher something in her face. Then, without warning, he reached for the call button beside his bed. Lena's pulse spiked. "Mr. Mercer, wait." He pressed it. A second later, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Yes, room 412? Daniel didn't take his eyes off Lena. "Get me the hospital administrator. Now." Lena's stomach dropped. This was it. She was going to be fired, written up, maybe even reported to the nursing board. Her career, everything she worked for, gone, because she couldn't stay on her feet. The administrator arrived within minutes. A tall, harried-looking man named Mr. Holloway, his tie slightly askew, as if he'd thrown it on in a hurry. He took one look at Lena still on the floor and paled. "What's going on here?" Daniel didn't hesitate. This nurse has been on shift for 36 hours straight. 36. And when she collapsed from exhaustion, no one even noticed. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. "Do you have any idea how unacceptable that is?" Mr. Holloway's mouth opened, then closed. "Mr. Mercer, I assure you, we have policies in place to prevent this kind of—" "Clearly you don't," Daniel cut in. "Because if you did, she wouldn't be on your floor right now, barely able to stand." Lena's face burned with humiliation. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never come back up. But then Daniel did something she never expected. He turned to Mr. Holloway and said, "Fire her supervisor." Silence. Mr. Holloway blinked. Excuse me?" "You heard me," Daniel said. "Fire whoever is responsible for this kind of negligence, and hire more staff. Or my next call is to the press." Lena's breath caught. This wasn't a complaint about her. This was him fighting for her. Mr. Holloway stammered something about looking into it, about protocols, but Daniel wasn't having it. "No, you fix it. Today." When the administrator finally left, the room was thick with silence. Lena couldn't bring herself to look at Daniel. She didn't know what to say, but then quietly he spoke again. "Go home, Lena. Get some sleep." She finally met his eyes. There was no anger there, no disdain, just something she couldn't quite name. And for the first time in 36 hours, Lena felt like she could finally breathe. The ripple effect. The morning sun streamed to the windows of St. Michael's administrative offices, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Lena sat stiffly in an uncomfortable chair outside Mr. Holloway's door, her fingers twisting the hem of her scrubs. She should have gone home like Daniel said. She should have slept. But the moment she'd stepped out of room 412, her mind had been racing too fast to rest. The door swung open abruptly. "Ms. Carter," Mr. Holloway said, his voice clipped. "Come in." The office smelled like coffee and stale paperwork. Framed diplomas lined the walls, and a massive desk dominated the space, covered in files and a sleek laptop. Mr. Holloway didn't sit. He paced behind the desk, his tie loosened further now, his expression unreadable. "Do you have any idea," he began slowly, "how much trouble you caused?" Lena's stomach dropped. "Mr. Mercer is one of our most high-profile patients. His family's donations fund half this wing." Holloway stopped pacing and fixed her with a hard look. "And now he's threatened to go public about our staffing issues unless we make immediate changes." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't know what to say. Apologize? Defend herself? Holloway sighed, rubbing his temples. "Nurse Carter, I've reviewed your file. Spotless record. Top of your class. But this," he gestured vaguely toward the door, "this can't happen again." Before Lena could respond, the door burst open. A woman stormed in mid-40s. Perfectly styled blonde hair, a designer pantsuit that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. Lena recognized her immediately. Claire Mercer, Daniel's sister and the current CEO of Mercer Technologies, while Daniel recovered. "Mr. Holloway," Claire said, her voice like ice. "We need to talk. Alone." Holloway paled. "Of course, Ms. Mercer. Nurse Carter was just leaving." No. Claire's sharp gaze landed on Lena. She stays. Lena's pulse pounded in her ears as Claire turned to Holloway. My brother just informed me that one of your nurses collapsed after a 36-hour shift. That's illegal. That's criminal. Claire's manicured nails tapped against her leather portfolio. And yet, instead of addressing the systemic issues, I hear you were about to reprimand her? Holloway's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Ms. Mercer, I assure you, we take our staff's well-being very seriously. Bullshit. Claire's voice cracked like a whip. You're lucky Daniel doesn't want to sue. But here's what's going to happen. She pulled a document from her portfolio and slapped it on the desk. Mercer Technologies is funding an independent audit of this hospital's staffing policies, effective immediately. And she, Claire pointed at Lena without looking at her, is going to be part of the review committee. Lena's breath caught. What? Holloway looked like he'd been slapped. Ms. Mercer, with all due respect, Nurse Carter isn't qualified. She's exactly who's qualified, Claire snapped. She's the one living this nightmare every day. Finally, she turned to Lena. Her expression softened, just slightly. My brother says you're the only nurse here who actually gives a damn. So, are you in? Lena's mind spun. This was insane. She was just a nurse. She wasn't a policymaker. She wasn't. Then she remembered. The night she'd cried in the supply closet from exhaustion. The patients she couldn't save because there weren't enough hands. The way her body had given out on that floor. She lifted her chin. I'm in. Claire smirked. Good. She turned back to Holloway. We start Monday. And if I hear one word about retaliation against Nurse Carter, the audit becomes a lawsuit. Are we clear? Holloway's nod was barely perceptible. Claire strode out as suddenly as she'd arrived, leaving Lena standing there, shell-shocked. Holloway sank into his chair, looking 10 years older. You're dismissed, Nurse Carter. His voice was hollow. Lena turned to leave, but at the door, she hesitated. Mr. Holloway? He didn't look up. This can be a good thing, she said quietly. For all of us. His bitter laugh followed her out the door. The hallway was too bright, too loud. Lena's legs carried her on autopilot toward the staff lockers, her mind reeling. She barely noticed the whispers as she passed. Other nurses staring, murmuring. Word had clearly spread. She reached her locker and leaned her forehead against the cool metal. What had just happened? A voice behind her made her jump. Looks like you've had a morning. Lena turned. Daniel Mercer sat in his wheelchair by the vending machines, a bottled water in his lap. His expression was unreadable. You! Lena's voice cracked. You did this? Daniel shrugged. I made a phone call. Lena stared at him. Why? For the first time since she'd met him, Daniel Mercer looked almost uncertain. He rolled closer, his voice dropping. Because no one else was going to. The simple truth of it hit her, like a punch to the chest. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Claire Mercer. Lena looked back at Daniel, her hands shaking. The first step forward. The Mercer Technologies building loomed over downtown Chicago, its glass exterior reflecting the morning sun in sharp, blinding flashes. Lena stood across the street, clutching her coffee like a lifeline, her stomach in knots. She had spent the entire weekend replaying Friday's events in her head, oscillating between disbelief and sheer terror. Now, as she stared up at the sleek modern structure, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to walk into a world she didn't belong in. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Claire. Conference room 12B. Don't make me wait. Lena took a deep breath and crossed the street. The lobby was all marble floors and minimalist art, the air thick with the quiet hum of power and money. The receptionist barely glanced up as Lena gave her name, then gestured toward the elevators with a polished smile. 12th floor. Someone will meet you. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. Lena adjusted her blazer, borrowed from her sister for the occasion, and smoothed her hair. She had never dressed up for work before. Scrubs were her uniform, her armor. This felt like playing pretend. The door slid open to reveal Claire Mercer leaning against a reception desk, typing rapidly on her phone. She looked up as Lena stepped out, her sharp eyes scanning her from head to toe in one swift, assessing glance. "You're late." Lena blinked. "It's 8:58. Claire smirked and pushed off the desk. "Exactly. In this building, on time is late." She turned on her heel and strode down the hallway, without checking if Lena followed. "Come on. We have a lot to cover." The conference room was all glass and steel, a massive table dominating the center. A handful of people were already seated. Serious-looking men and women in tailored suits, their laptops open, their expressions carefully neutral. Lena recognized one of them, Dr. Evans, the chief of medicine at St. Michael's. He didn't look happy to be here. Claire took her seat at the head of the table and gestured for Lena to sit beside her. "Everyone, this is Lena Carter. She's the nurse my brother won't shut up about." Lena's face burned as every eye in the room turned to her. Claire continued without missing a beat. "As you all know, Mercer Technologies is funding an independent review of St. Michael's staffing policies. Lena's here to make sure we don't get lost in the numbers and forget what actually happens on the floor." She tapped a key on her laptop, and a presentation lit up the screen behind her. "Let's begin." For the next 2 hours, Lena sat in stunned silence as Claire dissected the hospital's staffing models with surgical precision. She had data, so much data, on nurse-to-patient ratios, overtime hours, burnout rates. Things Lena had felt in her bones, but had never seen laid out so starkly in black and white. Then Claire turned to her. "Lena, tell them what a typical shift looks like for you." All eyes were on her again. Lena's throat tightened. She thought of the nights she'd worked through her breaks, the time she prioritized charting over eating, the way her hands shook by hour 30. She took a breath and told them. When she finished, the room was silent. Dr. Evans cleared his throat. "Nurse Carter, while your dedication is commendable, you must understand that hospitals operate on tight budgets. We can't simply—" Claire cut him off. "You can. You just don't want to." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "Because it's easier to exploit people like Lena than to admit your profit margins are built on their backs." A tense silence followed. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke up. "What's the solution, then?" Lena turned. A woman in a sleek gray suit, someone from Mercer's finance team, was watching Claire expectantly. Claire smiled. "We start small. Pilot program. 1 floor at St. Michael's with safe staffing ratios, mandatory breaks, no overtime without consent. We fund the difference for 6 months. Then we measure outcomes, patient safety, nurse retention, cost of turnover." She paused. "And if it works, we scale it." Dr. Evans looked like he wanted to argue, but Claire was already standing, signaling the meeting's end. "We'll reconvene next week with a finalized plan." Dismissed. As the others filed out, Claire turned to Lena. "Well, what do you think?" Lena stared at her. "I think you're terrifying." Claire laughed, a real, unexpected sound. "Good. You'll need to be, too, if you want this to work." She handed Lena a folder. "Read this. It's everything we have on staffing laws in other states. Next meeting, you're presenting." Lena's stomach dropped. "Me?" Claire's smile was all challenge. "You're the expert here, not me. Start acting like it." Lena took the folder, her hand steady for the first time all day. Maybe she didn't belong here, but she was going to make sure no nurse ever felt as broken as she had on that floor. And that was worth stepping into the unknown for. 3 months later, Lena stood at the nurse's station of St. Michael's newly renovated 4th floor, watching as her colleagues actually took their breaks. The pilot program was working. Turnover was down. Patient satisfaction scores were up. And in her inbox was an invitation from Claire, a proposal to expand the program statewide. She smiled and got back to work. The first step had been taken, but the fight was far from over.